Hi, disciple, and hi, my eye watchers. This is Jetsu, and on my channel, I talk about God, His love for us, and His Son coming back. So, if you're new to my channel, welcome, welcome, welcome. And for those coming back, I thank you for coming back to my channel. Today, we're going to talk about forgiveness and look at forgiveness and see how it can play a part in our life, and see when we let things go, or it clears our soul, our mind. So sometimes we have to learn to let things go, forgive, and move on. So we're going to look at Philemon, and we're going to look at Onesimus and Paul. Paul was a mediator in between. Philemon was a very rich merchant who owned slave back in ancient time. It's not just today they own slave, not just, in our generation they own slave. Back in those days they own slave too. And Philemon was converted by Paul, and now he's a Christian, and his home was the home that they were having church service, because they didn't have a lot of church like we have today. So the question is, why is Philemon a Christian and his home is where they're having church? Why is he owning slave? And why is his slave is not emancipated? So we're going to speak of one of his slaves. One of his slaves knew Paul. His name was Onesimus, and he may have met Paul in Caesarea, may have met Paul in Rome, may have met Paul in Ephesus, because Paul was in jail more than once. And so now there was something going on between Philemon and Onesimus. Onesimus may have not done his job right and caused some profit and loss for Philemon, so he didn't gain any profit. Or maybe Onesimus stole something from Philemon. But whatever it is, Onesimus fled to Rome. At this time, Paul was in jail, so he fled to Rome, to the jail where Paul was. And he hangs out with Paul, and he was there with Paul, and he told Paul, lay it out to Paul. And Paul said, you got to go back home. So before he went back home, Paul converted him, teaching him about Christianity, converted him and everything, and let him change his way, toss out his old bed. And now he has a new bed. Now he knows Jesus, came to Jesus, and now he's a Christian, and he knows the truth and the light. So Paul wrote a masterpiece letter to give to him, for him to take back home to Philemon. In the letter he said, Philemon, he's the one who converted Philemon. He said, you are a fellow Christian, a fellow slave of God. And I want you to prepare a room for me, which is an indication that Paul is getting out of jail soon. And I want you to treat Onesimus as one. He's now a converted Christian, and I want you to treat him as one of the brother, because he's my son. Paul, take him as his son now. And I also, whatever charges he run up, or whatever you profit, gain, you lost, put it on my tab. I will pay for it when I get out and I come. So this is what Paul is telling in the letter, the masterpiece letter, I call it, he wrote to Philemon, to said, when you're a Christian, forgive and forget and just let go. I know it's hard, but let it go. And why is it Onesimus not emancipated? I converted you, Philemon, and you are no fellow worker. Why you still have slave? Why you still have own slave? Emancipate Onesimus. You shouldn't be having church service in your house and owning slave. You shouldn't be doing these things. So the question is, after Philemon got the letter from Onesimus that Paul sent to him, did Philemon actually do this command that Paul asked him in the letter to do? We may not know. Why? Because it was not written down, not everything written down. So Philemon, after Onesimus went back home, gave him the letter. He read the letter, the command that Paul asked him to do. He may not have done all of it. He may not even do any. We don't know. He may only do some of it. Could be. But most importantly, Onesimus should have been emancipated. Your home is the home they have in service, and you're owning slave. And then you're going to say you're in the light? You're not in the light. You don't know the true light. Because if you know the true light, you know that God owns everything. And we, as man, don't own anything. And you shouldn't be owning anybody. So, this is what Paul is letting him know. You're a fellow workers of God. And this is what Paul is saying in the letter. You are a fellow workers of God. And you should not be owning slave. And they, Onesimus, should be emancipated, and Onesimus should be treated as equal, as one of us. This is what Paul said, as brother, as a Christian brother. So whether or not you should even be owning anyone. So this goes to show, my fellow disciples, that forgiveness and move on is important. If we don't learn to forgive, just forgive. Somebody step on your toe, talk it over, forgive, let it go and move on, because you want your soul to be free. And you must look around. This is how I treat situation nowadays. Because like I said, nowadays is the end times, and everybody attitudes is popping. Everything is popping nowadays. People are behaving out of character. And you have to learn to let go. And you have to just pick yourself up and just keep going. Because people trying to drag everybody down now. And this is like end times. We have to be careful. We have to learn how we walk on that rugged road. So until then, my fellow eye watchers and disciples, let us all learn to forgive and move on and let things go, so our soul can be free and just have a lot of God's love in us. So let us all just try to walk on the narrow road. So until then, my fellow eye watchers and disciples of Christ, I just want to say, we all have to try and do our ultimate best. So until then, God first, man second. So if you like what you heard, please subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, so when I upload anything new, use the first to get it. So until then, God bless. God first, man second. God first, man second. So until then, thank you and God bless.